Oh, hi everyone. Hello. No. There we go. That's better. Yeah, so what I'm going to do, the paintings that are on the walls here are done, well, a lot of these are done in the way that I'm going to do this. What I like to do is when I'm outside painting, what I want to be interested in more than anything else is the experience of being outside, and that's what I want my paintings to have when they're finished, is to give off some of the experience that I had when I was outside. So they're not necessarily pictures of where I am, because I think you can go somewhere and you can make a picture of it. You can say, okay, that's a hill, that's a tree, that's a cow, or whatever, you know, it's a fence, and that tells you what the things are and what you're looking at, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what it's like to be there. It's not necessarily what it feels like, because it's not so much that. It's more of, it's just trying to have that experience. So all the paintings is what I'm trying to do. So what in all of the work I'm doing, I'm trying to get them to give back some of that experience that I had while I was there. So when I'm outside, I do things like this, which are just on large pieces of paper. I'm not trying to think about composition. For those at the back. Yeah, I'm not trying to think about composition. I'm not trying to think about what it's going to look like when it's finished even, because what I want to do is respond to what's there, react to what's there. So I think the most important thing to get on these sheets of paper is the energy of being out in the landscape, the sense of movement, and part of that, you know, that experience of being outside. And then by separating out the processes of looking and drawing and seeing and experiencing, and then the other part of the work is made by doing the composition. But I can do that back here in the studio. So that's what I do. I separate the processes. There's the looking part of it and the experiencing part of it, and then back in the studio I think about doing composition. And so a lot of these pieces are done in that way. So, you know, the pieces that are on the walls here have started out as things like this. And then what I do is I crop them down and I maybe do a bit of collage. Sometimes I do a bit of work over the top of them, but not very much, because I think you have to be a little bit careful when you start altering things later on. So I've got something in my sketchbook like this, and I've kind of finished doing it, and I think, oh, maybe it needs a little bit here, or maybe it needs a little bit there, and I might add a couple of marks, maybe some pencil marks or something like that. But I think if you start going back in with paint, and you can very quickly start overworking it, and then it becomes something different. So it's not so much of a case of being like pure about it. It doesn't have to be like, you have to have that kind of purity. It was all done outside. But it's more a case of losing the spontaneity of working outside, which is what I'm trying to get into the paintings, really, trying to get that kind of spontaneous feel, but into finished pieces of work. So I did these, these are some I made earlier. No. But so what I thought I'd do is I'll just do a bit of the cropping and collage side of this process, so you can get a sense of how some of these paintings came together. So yeah, I'll just crack on with it. I think now what I'm looking for is anyone who's wandered in and thinking what the hell's going on here, you can leave. Don't feel embarrassed about going, this is not what I came for. Nobody did. I was lucky. It could have just been like a real stampede to the Okay, I don't know how easy it's going to be for everyone to see. You can come forward a bit if you want. I think the only thing is, if you don't stand in front of this camera, that would be fantastic. But you can come further forward, because obviously I'm on this desk. I'll try and hold things up for you to see as much as possible. So, okay, well, what I've got here, I actually didn't do this outside. I just did it just for this demo. So I was just standing here and throwing some paint around. So it's not really referencing anything, but I guess you could think, you know, hills, sky, bit of wind or whatever. So, but what I wanted to do is try and use this to make a composition. So, because I think when you're doing a kind of abstractions of the landscape. I think the composition is really important, and I think the more abstracted your work is, I think the more important composition is, because if you're making paintings which are quite obvious pictures, you can get away with things. You know, if you put a boat, you got a little boat floating in the harbour, someone's going to look at it and go, oh, it's a little boat floating in the harbour. But if you've got a load of marks which are not necessarily that easy to read, they don't refer to anything very specifically, the composition of the finished painting has to kind of really work. You've got to find the rhythm, you've got to find some way of guiding the viewer's eye around the image and give them some sort of focal point, some way of actually understanding what they're looking at, even if it's not that overt. It has to feel like it's a complete piece. Because the paintings that I do, I think of them like poetry in a way, because in poetry you understand the language that they're written in, but you don't necessarily, you're not told everything. There's room for you, there's ambiguity, there's suggestion. Some of it's to do with the rhythm of the way the words actually, you speak them, as you read them, as you speak them, there's rhythm and there's momentum in there as well. And so I think of my paintings in a similar way, that they're ambiguous, they're landscape. I hope you can see that they're landscape, but I'm not trying to tell you everything. I'm trying to leave room for you to make some decisions. So that ambiguity is quite important. So again, it comes back to the composition. I'm trying to get the compositions so that when you're looking at the painting, it makes sense, but I'm not telling you everything. So I hope that made sense. Okay, let's have a go. So what I like to do, the first thing I like to do is I get a couple of just bits of offcuts of these, a bit of mount board, and I'll put them on my painting. And what I'm looking for when I'm doing this is somewhere to start. I'm not looking for a finished composition, but I'm looking for a nice balance of light and darks, different types of marks. And so it's a good, if I'm looking for a good starting point. So if I do something like, see if I can hold this up. Is that where it was? So if I do something like that, it has quite a different feel, because there's a bit of composition going on, but it has quite a different feel to this piece just as it is like that, where there's not really any sense of composition. And I think a lot of my pieces tend to be a bit like that, where you look at them and your eye kind of goes around in circles, rather than having like a fixed focal point. What's what I'm looking for is to kind of draw your eye around it, so you're wandering, but you don't ever go, oh, it's trying to bring you back in all the time. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So let's use something like that as a starting point. Right. And I will just sharpen this pencil slightly. I'm just going to make a mark just to give myself a guide where to crop this. I think it's about right, that. I'll just make a little mark there. It's got the wrong glasses on again. Perfect. There we go. Right, now, ruler. Goes out of the way. Where's it gone? There we go. So this is, like I said, this is just going to be the starting point. Looks like that now. I don't worry about that though. I don't think of this as tearing up. This is it's editing. If you're a filmmaker, for example, you may film hundreds of hours of footage, and then when you get to the editing stage, you take away all the things that are not telling the story that you want to tell, and you try and make it more concise. because if you made a movie that was 10 hours long or something, you're going to lose, your audience is going to get lost and bored before they get to the point of what you were trying to say. And I kind of think of this in the same sort of way. It's like an editing process. Let's move that one out of the way. Okay, so that's what I've got so far. And it's quite different if you can remember what it looked like before, which was a bit more like this, I suppose. It was a bit more like that. So hopefully you can see that there's a composition starting to happen. So it's more, like I said, it's more concise. I haven't really, not really taken anything away that wasn't in these pieces already, because if you look at what's actually here, what I've got left, pieces like this, I've still got a lot of these marks in here, but now they've got a little bit more purpose because they're in a smaller space. So another good thing about working on large pieces of paper and then cropping them down is what you get, what I like to think of as a large mark in a small space. So this is a big mark coming across here, this big sweeping brush mark coming across there. And I think that that's got quite a lot of power, but if I started it on this size paper, if I just started on a little piece of paper like this, it's quite difficult to get those sorts of marks, because this mark has actually sort of started over here somewhere, and I've dragged the brush all the way that way. So it's got quite a lot of energy and movement. So what I like to do with these is stick them into my sketchbooks. And like I said, a lot of the pieces that are on the walls here were done in this way, and they started off in my sketchbook. And you might think, what's the point of putting them in the sketchbook if you're only going to take them out again and put them in a frame? But I think that sketchbooks are very creative spaces, that you always feel very free in a sketchbook because of what it is. And I think there's like a psychological side to it, that because you're not feeling, oh, I've got to finish this painting, or I've got to make a nice painting. I didn't start it on a really nice canvas or a nice board or an expensive piece of watercolor paper. There's a freedom, and it's a creative space, and I think sometimes it's a way of just getting over your own insecurities about what you're doing. I came to see this demo and it was just like watching glue dry. Let me just stick that down and find another bit of that. Okay, excuse me. Right, so we've got, okay, so let's have a look. I mean, let me have a look at it as well. Yeah, so I think it's a start. I quite like this bit here. There's a nice mark going that way, where there's like a sweeping kind of cloudy sky kind of mark going that way. So it's got a bit of energy to it, but I think it can probably go a little bit further with it. So let's have a look. I'm going to look at the pieces I've got left over and look at this. I think I'm trying to work out what is lacking. So at this point, I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, it's all right, but I think there's some areas which are a little bit slightly boring. This is a little bit boring down here. I quite like the tone, but it's a bit dull. Could do with being a bit more exciting. So I'm going to see if I can find something in my offcuts that will work. This is where you hear the wheels grinding in my head. What about this bit? This has got some nice drippy bits on it. I do like that actually. So I'm looking at this and thinking, this piece down here, it's dark and it's doing quite a good job of sort of anchoring the bottom of the painting. You see what I mean? And then, but I'm sort of looking at this piece and thinking it's a little bit more interesting. It's very similar. It's come from, has it come from there? It's come from there, hasn't it? It's quite similar, but I think it's just a little bit more interesting with the drips on it. So I'm going to try and use that piece for starters. But I don't want this. I don't want this straight edge because there's no straight edges in this painting. So this is always such a gamble, isn't it? It's like I'm doing this in front of people. You know, normally I can do this on my own. If it doesn't work, I go, oh yes, look, and then I'll show you one later on that I did. Who was it? Was it one of you was saying that earlier, wasn't it? Yeah. You can't get away with it, you know. Come in. Come closer. Come closer. I'm just going to tidy up this bit here. Okay, so I'm looking at, it looks a bit like this at the moment. You think it's better than that? I think it is. It's what to do at the bottom here. Sometimes, not all the time, they end up sticking out the bottom a little bit. They're not always neat squares. I think this is going to have to be one of those cases, but I don't want this straight edge, so I don't really like that very much. So let's tear some of that away. Get rid of that straight edge as well. So I'm not looking to hide the collage, but I want it to integrate into the painting a bit. I don't want it to look like it's sort of sticking out or you know, like I said with the straight edges, I don't want straight edges in there because there aren't any anywhere else in the painting. I think, yeah, I'm going to go for that. So I'm going to stick this bit down. Got there. I'm going to stick this bit down because I still think it's a bit more interesting than that bit. Although I do like this orange, but I might just have to live with that. I got that pink line instead. Traded a bit of orange paint for a pink line.
Is that a very strong PVA?
It's not as strong as it could be, this one. I've got another one somewhere. Normally I use a waterproof PVA, which is, yeah, as it sounds, it doesn't matter. You know, if it gets damp, it doesn't lift up again. Oh, it's sliding around. I think it's just because it's really warm today. We'll be all right. Okay, so we've got there. Now I'm looking at that thinking, while I was doing that, I'd spotted something over here and I was thinking, I like the look of this blue bit here. Show on that camera over there. This blue piece, I think, is a bit more interesting than what's going on maybe here. Let's try it out. I want something bold. It's a little bit too safe at the moment. I do quite like that. I'm looking at this kind of blue, drippy blue sky bit. I quite like the look of it. I quite like this over here, so I'm going to try and keep that and do something over here. But I want something a bit more bold. This just seems a little bit, I don't know, just safe. It's safe. So I'm going to get rid of this straight edge. I think that looks quite exciting and it kind of echoes what's going on over here. Let's try it. Oh, I need to lose this bit at the bottom though because it's covering up all that stuff I just did just now. So I just quite like this shape. I don't always do fiddly tearing. I try and keep it as simple as possible, but I just feel like it's actually needed a bit of, I just like this drippy bit. That's all I want really. You don't know you've got it until you've got it. I've got it now. I don't know, it's a little bit of glue. Stick it down loosely. I don't know, what do we think? I quite like it. I quite like. I don't think I'll have it sticking quite out as much. I quite like it because it's bold. It's like it's a bold statement. And the point of doing this is not necessarily to make a finished painting. Let's go for it. It's more a case of finding a visual idea, because I use, as well as ending up framing some of them. The other reason I do this in my sketchbooks is because then I've got these books that I can use when I'm in my studio doing some painting. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that I'm going to take out and frame. In fact, it's more likely and not going. It's not going to be. But I do want it to be a strong visual idea. Right. So that's what I've got now. Don't worry about that top bit. I mean, I'll either tear it off or not, but it's sort of blending in with the page behind anyway. But I think that's more interesting. You know, when we started, we had something which was more like this. So there's no sense of composition or, like I was talking about these sort of types of marks. This corner is a strong corner, and we've got the dark sort of anchor point down there. And now I've got this strong mark which is bringing your eye down into the painting. So I was looking for that rhythm in the image, and I think it's starting to get it. You know, it's kind of got this is coming this way, but it kind of is, this blue corner is so strong. Your eye doesn't want to shoot off the edge of the painting. It's sort of contained within the image. And this is bringing your eye down this way. And then we've got some interest here. So there's a kind of circular composition. I just don't know if it needs any more. Let's go. Well, lots of nice offcuts. There's a nice bit here, but I don't think I want to cover up that corner. No, I don't think so.
Would you do another one with the bits left over, or would you bin?
Usually what I do, if I'm doing a session like this and I've got several, say I've been out painting outside and I come back with maybe 5 or 6 of those sheets of paper, I tend to work through that group of paintings. But then if I've got a load of offcuts after that, I get rid of them. I might use them, on different paintings. I think what this needs maybe is a bit of pencil or something. Just like I said, I don't want to do too much over the top. But just the odd mark here and there might be quite nice. This is a oil pastel. It's just a big chunky oil pastel, but I quite like the idea of just dragging a couple of marks through. Just sort of drag that. It sort of brings this blue down into the painting, which was quite nice, and it matches the rest of it quite nicely. And there's another chunky oil pastel, which is quite similar in tone to some of this, so it might help to just a couple of marks just to give it a little bit of a focus. And what else? What have we got here? I find these orange and reddy sort of type pencils work quite well with the blues, because they're quite a contrasting colour to the blues. The orangey reds are quite nice. So just maybe a few marks. I think that'll do. Stop fiddling. I'll stop fiddling. Just a little bit of that little hot pencil can make quite a big difference. So I think I'll probably call it quits, just pointing at that camera over there. Like I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to YouTube at the same time. It's very confusing. Okay, so we went from that big scruffy bit of paper to something which I think's got a little bit more, a little bit of composition. It's got some, it's more concise. I didn't really take anything away, because if you look at what's left of what I've torn away, I don't really see it as losing anything, because there's not really anything on here that you would worry about. So I think now it's got a bit more of a kind of a purpose to it. So, there we go. Okay. Yeah, I would do if I was going to frame it. If it's in the book like this, I wouldn't bother. It'll just stay in the book like that. There's nothing on it that's really going to. There's nothing on it that's going to come off. Maybe a little bit of the oil pastel where it's really soft, but as you can see, when you don't really get any transfer onto the other page. The only thing is just to remember not to do them face to face. If you do that, then you're in trouble, especially if you get a good one and you've got to tear up another good one on the other side. That could be a bit heartbreaking. So I'll leave it like this. So this paper that I did the drawing on, it's just cartridge paper, but it's reasonably heavyweight. So it's about 140, maybe slightly heavier, this one. But I don't put anything on it first. You don't need to. The trick with doing those sorts of paintings, these kinds of paintings on paper without any primer or anything like that, is to just not use very much water. It's much better to use. I'll just put those at the front. I like to think that what you want to do is get the paint. Just use acrylic particularly. Doesn't really like being watered down. So it's not. I think sometimes people make the mistake of using acrylic like a sort of thick watercolour, but it doesn't really like that. It's much better being used straight out of the tube, more or less. And then also you don't end up swamping the paper with water, because that's what really gets them to go really muddy, and they get the paper starts to break down with the water, and they take ages to dry. It's the water that's causing all those problems. So on these paintings that I did to cop down, there's very little water, so it's just more or less neat paint out of the tube. And then you don't need to worry too much about it, the paper falling apart. These chunky ones, yeah, they're Sennelier ones, yeah. Yeah, I do like the big chunky ones. I use them on my big paintings as well. So.
The difference that made when you did that mark.
That little blue mark.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about working like this is that you can do a lot. You can do a huge amount. If you're working on like boards and canvases and you get very tight about trying to finish things, you don't get very much done. But like this, I mean, these, if you're outside painting these sorts of things, they take 10 minutes or something. Any more than that, and you end up overworking them. And then you come back from a couple of hours outside, and you've got 5 or 6 of these sorts of things, and then you do this. You fill your sketchbook up very quickly, and so you're getting a lot of experience in a very short space of time. So you're teaching yourself a huge amount very quickly, much more than if you just tried to do finished paintings, or you're doing a little sketch and then you're trying to scale it up. I find this is a much more creative and a useful way of working. You get more out of it, in a short space of time. So that in the workshop that we're doing in the live workshop, it's like a 2-day workshop, but I expect people to fill a sketchbook like this, in a couple of days, because you can just do so much. So the learning is very fast. Composition, mark making, all that kind of stuff. It works really well. So there you go.
That's great.
Thank you. It's nice to see so many people here.